Hi everyone, it's Denise at Dobby Books. Welcome back. I want to briefly cover what I'm currently reading and what I got today at my library haul. All right, so here we go. I'm still reading for Jane Austen July, Mansfield Park. Not as quickly as I wanted to, but I'm getting there. I only have until the end of the month, so I've got to finish it. And so far, so good. Let's see if I have enough time after I finish this to cover the other books that I said I was going to read for Jane Austen July. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. So there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 books altogether. Some are children's books, so I can go really quickly through them, and other ones are a collection of critiques and essays written. That shouldn't take too long. So, still reading Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. And what I'm also reading is a book by Frank Schaeffer, Crazy for God. I've been doing a combination of the audiobook and this one. I've got until August 3rd before I've got to bring it back to the library. I've been trying to find this at my library sale. I haven't had any luck, so I ended up checking it out at the library. So far, so good. I forgot what chapter I'm at, but so far he's talked about when he was a little boy growing up in Switzerland at their parents', I would say, commune, if I can use that word, L'Abri, Switzerland. And he talks about, he describes his mother and then his father, and he's very honest, the good and the bad. You know, he goes through both. And I like how he is presenting them as just very ordinary people. And he does point out to his reading audience that they were afraid of people seeing them as very ordinary people, flawed people, just like all of us are, because they felt that they had to give an image of Christianity that would be more socially acceptable. And wow, I thought to myself, that is not an uncommon trap. Now, I no longer consider myself an evangelical Christian, but I'm very familiar with this world that Frank Schaeffer is talking about. And just remembering back in the 80s and 90s, when I was in that world, how that was such a so much at the front of our thoughts as evangelicals, that we had to present an image to the world that would be attractive. And I don't want to make it completely superficial. There was genuineness in there, but it had a tendency to make you feel, to leave you feeling at times perhaps artificial or anxious, questioning yourself perhaps. Maybe some of us would struggle with the sense of, am I really, am I genuine, am I real, am I really a Christian? All these, different things that it could cause. And he sensed that, when he got old enough, he started sensing that. I'm not yet at the point where he's in his 20s. He right now is probably 12. He was always the he had 3 older sisters, and he was much younger than them. And he was always the kid who asked the questions, and sometimes those alarming questions. And his mother was the one who would get a little, her feathers would get a little ruffled. And he would notice that. So he would just ask her those questions because he just loved to see her reaction, And what was very interesting about Edith Schaeffer, his mother, now she had a very different upbringing than his father. His father was just a blue-collar kind of family life, and it had some very rough edges to it. His mother was completely the opposite. She did grow up as a child of missionaries, but she had a very refined upbringing. She was well attended to as a child, and she always dressed a certain way and did things a certain way. Those two, Francis Schaeffer, his father, and his mother Edith Schaeffer, were really such different people. They really were. It's a wonder that they got along as well as they did. But I can see going back to the image that they needed to present, that can always leave you feeling like the outsider. And this is what Frank Schaeffer brought up, that he always had this feeling that they were the outsiders, trying to make those people on the, how can I explain this? I don't know whether he used the word insider or something, but they were the people over here trying to influence the people over here with how they were behaving so that they could bring them back over there to them. It's hard to explain, but he made a good point. That was something that really rang a bell with me. But surprisingly, Edith Schaeffer, his mother, was very frank about certain topics. She would talk to her children about sex, and she was very open about that with her kids. He was a very young kid. He knew stuff about intimacy and things, not inappropriately, but very openly. His mother would talk to him about puberty and what happens to boys during puberty, and that a lot of boys his age didn't even know about yet. And he said because he was the youngest of four and the only boy, he said he was surrounded by all these female topics and issues that girls had to deal with during adolescence and just after that. He knew it all. And his mother would even bring up her sex life with her husband, the kids. And I was thinking about, is this inappropriate? No, I don't think it was. I don't think it crossed a line, but I think it was definitely unusual. And thinking back, if I were a mother, why would I speak to my kids like that? But it's different because Edith Schaeffer grew up in a different generation than me, and I'm thinking she was striving to. I think maybe she was thinking, I don't want my kids to be so in the dark about this, perhaps like she might have felt growing up. And she wanted her children to be comfortable with this and to understand that this was the future and this was okay, whatever. But that surprised me about Edith Schaeffer bringing up those things. And another thing I didn't know about Francis Schaeffer, his father, here was what we would refer to as a fundamentalist Christian. The whole family was. They didn't drink and they didn't smoke and they didn't watch movies and they didn't dance. And it took them, his parents, later on through the years to relax a little more about that. But this is in the 1950s. And his parents didn't have issues with gay Christians. And they would be bothered by individuals, other Christians, who would tell them, well, this is a chosen lifestyle, because the Schaeffers didn't believe. This is the 1950s. This is something I never knew about them. So that's good to hear. Overall, I haven't gotten that, of course, he's only 12 at this point. But so far, because I knew the image of Francis Schaeffer, his father, and I still have that image, that idea in my mind about his father, that he was a good man, he was an honest man, but he lived a life of sincerity and integrity. So I want to see how much of that image I have in my mind is true or not. And Frank Schaeffer's going to know because he lived there 24/7. He knew them. So I am looking forward to reading more of this story. Again, it's by Frank Schaeffer, Crazy for God. Frank Schaeffer, I forgot to mention, he walked away from the evangelical world. He describes himself as an atheist who believes in God. And he has a Substack called It Must Be Said. I believe that's what it's called. And I do listen to that regularly, and I like his honesty. All right. Next book. These two books I purchased. The rest are my library finds. So let's start with the books that I got. The first one, when I went to Cambria, my husband and I went to Cambria a few days ago. We stayed there for a couple nights, and I stopped by a bookstore, of course. And I purchased this by St. John of the Cross, Dark Night of the Soul. I thought I had this book. I was trying to, as I collect my books for my classics, I thought I had this. I don't. I have the books by St. Teresa of Avila, and I don't have any from St. John of the Cross, because St. Teresa of Avila is St. John of the Cross's female counterpart. They were both religious. By that I mean religious. They were people who were, a Catholic term is like, if you are religious, you're a sister or a nun, or you're a monk. They were religious of the Carmelite order. And in the Catholic Church, you have orders, or communities might be a better word. So when you have sisters these are nuns, and there's a difference between a nun and a sister. A nun is a sister who spends her life enclosed in her convent, and they dedicate themselves to work and prayer. This is what monks do in a monastery. Okay. So there's the female and male part, nuns, monks. And priests and sisters go out into the world. Okay, so when you have orders or communities of these individuals, it means that they had a different founder of their community. So St. Dominic was the founder of the Dominican order, and St. Francis was the founder of the Franciscan order. And St. John of the Cross and St. Teresa of Avila are members of the Carmelite order. And I know the founder of the Carmelite order. Do you know that I had it 2 seconds ago, and now it's out of my head? If I remember, I'll go into it. And St. John of the Cross lived in the 16th century. He was a priest, so he was considered a friar, not a monk. And by the way, he died at the age of 49. You know what he died of? A condition called erysipelas, which is a bacterial infection of the skin. It's caused by strep A bacteria. We treat it today with antibiotics. They didn't have that in the 16th century. So I can imagine his death was this long, painful process, because I know eventually the pain affects your joints. And it's a miserable way to go. St. John of the Cross lived in the 16th century, meaning the 1500s. And if you know your history, you know that in the 1500s, a very important thing happened in religious history, the Reformation. And the Reformation was started when Martin Luther protested certain practices that were happening in the Catholic Church at the time, something he wanted to discuss with the Church and come to an agreement within the Church so that they could remove that which was definitely not, faithful to Church teaching. But instead, the Church didn't listen to him. They sort of blew him off, and eventually we get the Protestant breaking up, what they call the Protestantism was born, because the Protestants were those that protested against the Church Protestants. All right, so the Reformation was a movement that lasted around, I'd say, about 130 years. It affected all of Europe. It really changed the world. And it didn't really end until, I looked here, around 1648, in the Treaty of Westphalia, which was the conclusion of the 30 Years' War. And that Treaty of Westphalia established things like states' rights and each country being able to control their own nation and make their own decisions in other ways. Diplomacy was also established during that treaty. And when I think of also during the following, so let's say it ends at the end of the 30 Years' War, that's 1648. Britain is colonizing the United States, which was not yet the United States, but the colonizing the Americas. This was still recent memory. So when you imagine the founders of our country wanting to do this American experiment, they wanted to get rid of the bad stuff that they remember. Maybe they didn't live through it, maybe some were living on the tail end of it, but this was a recent enough memory. Like when I think of World War II, I didn't live through it, but it's recent enough memory, Vietnam War, etc., that they did not want their new nation to inherit the problems of the old. So you can understand why the founders, as we established our nation and began addressing certain issues as we went along, that we made the Establishment Clause, which in the Bill of Rights, and I want to get the words right, so I did scribble it down. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. They didn't want the wars and the tensions and division that would cause for a nation. They saw it happen in Europe, they didn't want it here. So maybe that can help us better understand why that came about. Getting back to St. John of the Cross, in the 16th century, during this wave of Reformation, the Catholic Church was dealing with Protestantism, and they also had their counter-Reformation to defend the Catholic Church, but also within the church itself, what had happened, and this was part of what caused the Reformation, the communities, these religious communities, got lazy, and there were many of them that were living in these communities, and they weren't living anything like a dedicated life of spirituality, community, unity. They really weren't praying. They were finding ways of bringing in money, schmoozing with the right people. It had just fallen apart. And the Carmelite order fell victim to that. St. John of the Cross was a reformer. He wanted to reform the Carmelite order to return to its original ideas when it was first started. When something is new and it's started, it's always wonderful because the goals are so clear, the objectives are so clear. It's wonderful, and everyone is so united in that. It's so simple and so beautiful, and that is what St. John of the Cross wanted the Carmelite order to return to, and as did Saint Teresa of Avila, same thing. And because power does not like to relinquish its power, St. John of the Cross didn't, he made his enemies. Because he was trying to do a good, those that wanted to keep their lazy ways fought against it and resisted it. So within his own community there, where he was living in particular, there were Carmelite communities throughout Europe, but in his, where he lived, he dealt with the hostilities there. At one point, they locked him up in a cell, this little tiny cell. He managed to escape through a window. Oh my gosh, he went through so much. And when you think, he was pretty much alone in this. He had a few followers who caught on to what he was saying and really were motivated to do this with him. And let's return to our original ways. And it was beautiful then, and it was truly committed then. But in general, a lot of those that were already there resisted. So St. John of the Cross is known in the Catholic Church as a great saint who was deeply spiritual and had a lot to teach us about a spiritual walk. So he's one of the greats in Catholic Church history, and my chronological book collection includes not just the Reformation and the writers during that Reformation, the Protestant writers, but also a lot of what was happening in the Catholic Church as well. And I finally have this, that's going to go in my collection under, medieval times. Next one. This arrived today. I think I ordered this on eBay like July 6th. It was from World of Books USA. And what I didn't like about it is that when you get eBay sellers who have this big collection of books, they give you the stock image of the book, not the real image of the book. And it's just the front cover, a front cover. It may not necessarily be the book that you're interested in. And I've tried to write them regarding certain books to say, can you send me a copy of a picture of the copyright page? Or I'll ask them questions like, is there any writing or highlighting in the book? Things like that, which to me are important. I always get the little generic answer that says, unfortunately, we received your email and appreciate your contacting us, but unfortunately, that book is in our warehouse and we can't check it right now to let you know, something along those lines. Very annoying. So I try to avoid them for the most part. But in this instance, I guess I couldn't find a copy of this book for the right price. So I ordered it from World of Books USA. There was a stock photo of a hard copy. This is a paperback. It was listed as very good condition. I disagree. I would consider it good condition. I mean, the spine is okay. The spine's okay. It's not cracked or anything. But there is writing in there. No highlights, but there is writing. That's a question they couldn't answer because they didn't have the book. That's the bummer. Plus, I ordered this July 6th. July 6th, it's the 29th today? That's too long for a book to arrive. For like almost 2 weeks. I'm looking at it, and all it said was, it has been received, which after they make their label, you'll notice when you order something, it says label was produced. Label was printed. Okay, great. That means that this person who's selling it's going to go to the post office either that day or the next day and ship it off. All it said after several days after it was printed, USPS has received it. Cool. I'm thinking, wow, this person must have held on to it for the longest time. And then it stayed stuck there forever. That the Postal Service had the book. And I was getting very annoyed, and I finally had contacted eBay to complain and say, nothing's happened, and I can't get a hold of the seller to let me know the status of the order. And I wanted to cancel it. But it ended up arriving. Isn't it interesting? Once I made the complaint, all of a sudden, this thing starts moving through USPS. I don't know. I'm kind of bummed about that. I purchased 1 or 2 things from World of Books USA, and it was okay. I mean, it was an okay experience, but I don't know. After this one, I'm not so sure. Anyways, Professing Literature, an Institutional History by Gerald Graff is, and I found out about this book from another YouTuber who said when he read this book, it really inspired him to study literature. And I looked for his name and I couldn't find it, and I apologize for that. Oh, I don't know who he was, but that got me thinking, I want to check this book out. And it says, Professing Literature is a history of academic literary studies in the United States, roughly from the Yale Report of 1828, which assured the primacy of the classical over the vernacular languages in American colleges for another half-century, to the waning of the new criticism in the 1960s and subsequent controversies over literary theory. And then it goes on and on. So this looks like an academic history of teaching literature. I'm interested. So I'm going to read this out and see what it's like. And let me show you my library purchases today. I've got them in my big Barnes & Noble bag that I get a new one every year from Barnes & Noble for being a member. So hint, hint, everybody. All right. First one, I've got another kids book to add to my collection, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Great Illustrated Classics. This is a paperback edition. So I'm going to add that to the girls' library. And I got this one. This is the, what's this series called? I don't know. The Library of America. Willa Cather. Novels and Stories, 1905 to 1918. Neato, huh? It's in good condition. All right. Next one I've got. The One and Only Ivan, because I'm collecting my Newbery Medal winners. There's another one that I've added to my collection, to the girls' library. This one I keep seeing. Excuse me. This one I keep seeing every time I go to any stinking bookstore anywhere. This book keeps popping up in front of me. And usually that's the hint. After a while I catch on, okay, maybe I need to read this. And today, of course, I got it at my library for a whole $1. Team of Rivals, Doris, Kearns, Goodwin. I have a feeling this is going to be a great read. And this one. See this collection here? when I did my video on the last time I purchased this from my library from, this is the series by Shelby Foote on the Civil War. It's 3 books. And I had mistakenly brought home 3 books, but 2 of those books were the same one, and I had to return the duplicate. And today I found the 2nd volume, which is the one that I was missing, and it's in such wonderful condition. Look at this. It looks brand new. Oh, I'm so excited. So now the Civil War series by Shelby Foote is now complete, and I'm very happy. And that, of course, would go with this because they're talking about the same time in American history. And the last one I got is a book by Shirley Jackson. I have some of her books, and this is going to add to my collection. It's called The Lottery and Other Stories. I like that cover. It caught my eye, and then I realized it said Shirley Jackson, so I got it. So this is really neato. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 books. That's it, everybody. Okay, everyone. That's it. So I got my 6 books. I paid $6. Enjoy your summer. Stay cool. If you like what you see and you hear, push that like and subscribe button. And I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.